Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Behnaz Mansouri. I'm a senior attorney with the Unemployment Law Project. The Unemployment Law Project has been around since 1984. We are the only freestanding legal aid organization in the country solely dedicated to unemployment. The Unemployment Law Project provides free legal advice and free legal representation to claimants in Washington state who have been denied benefits or whose award of benefits has been challenged. We're here today with our weekly webinar, which occurs every Monday at noon, and we thank you for joining us. Today's webinar, we're going to share the latest news on unemployment benefits, and we're going to answer your most frequently asked questions and any questions that you drop for us in the Q&A chat box. We'll provide resources as available through the chat box in the bottom of your screen. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today from the Unemployment Law Project, Executive Director John Tierpak, and Ann Paxton, Staff Attorney and Policy Director. I'll turn it over to you, Ann.
Thanks, Behnaz. Welcome, everybody. Exciting week this week. We have a lot going on, so I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible. But I wanted to start out with an update on what's happening on Capitol Hill in conversations between the Democrats and Republicans on what to do about extending the stimulus bill, which includes the CARES Act, which includes the unemployment insurance expansion. So the latest news is that they're closing in on a proposed bill that would extend the current PUA at the level, the expired PUC, which became the Lost Wages Assistance Program, which is now defunct, for $300 a week, picking up after it expires after the whole program expires December 26th. They won't, a $1,200 stimulus payment to individuals is not on the table right now, but it's the most current package that seems to be most likely is about almost $1 trillion. That's about half of what the Democrats were proposing from the House. They wanted a $2.2 trillion package, but it's twice what Mitch McConnell, the leader in the Senate, was proposing. So it would include also the extension of benefits at $300 extra, and also a freeze on evictions for people who cannot pay rent. The big news from our angle on this whole issue of extending the stimulus is that state legislators and the Employment Security Department sent a letter this week urging Congress to adopt an extension and pointing out, this was a bipartisan group plus the commissioner. They pointed out that state workforce agencies like ESD must be given enough time and resources to implement any changes so it doesn't interrupt the flow of the benefits. This is kind of the most current snag in the whole thing is how soon they can get this done. There's a budget date of December 11th. So something has to be done by then. And we'll probably include some update on maybe next week, we'll have an update on where things are. The state legislators say they support extensions of both PUA and PEUC without any lapses with transition periods to implement any changes to the programs when they reinstate the PUC, which was the $600, could be a $300 payment. They're also pushing to have the overpayment, the ban on waiver of overpayment under PUA, which now exists, to have that overturned, because that's going to cost a lot of people a lot of money. And they also are very concerned about this retroactive move by the Department of Labor to go back and test whether people were eligible week by week in their claims for PUA when they applied for them. This is a huge amount of labor and verification by the state agencies, affecting millions of people who were getting benefits without delay, which was the objective. But it turned out that the Department of Labor is now instructing states to retroactively contact individuals who filed and have them complete a weekly certification of the COVID-19 related reasons. And the states are being instructed that a weekly certification must be done now, even though neither the CARES Act nor previous guidance from the Department of Labor requires that. So it's a crackdown, and it's causing a lot of anguish on the part of claimants. This whole issue of where the economy is heading is had an interesting take in the Washington Post this week, which described what they call the K-shaped recovery. What is that? That's a recovery that has both an upside and a downside. And the upside is really for the people that are higher income, because about something like 60% of them have seen their circumstances improve, where people at the lower end of the economic scale are not seeing that. So it's a recovery that's bifurcated, as they're calling it. US Airlines are at historically unprecedentedly low levels. Leisure and hospitality has lost $3.4 million. And what one of the nation's leading economists, David Burson, says, we have the big drop, and for much of the country who are on the top part of the K, things are pretty good. Good for growth, good income, good job growth, good income growth, low interest rates. But the down part of the K, a substantial proportion of the population is hurting significantly. Just a brief mention of the GAO report, which came out basically just as just the morning of our last webinar, and that confirms what we've been trying to stress about the underpayment of PUA benefits to people who are gig workers or contract workers and have been receiving the minimum benefit. The GAO confirms that the average PUA benefit is far too low to be accurately reflecting what people's income on which their benefits are based really is. So they are stressing that the states need to actively engage with claimants to make sure that they're getting the correct amount. And we've been trying to stress that people need to submit whatever income documentation they can to show that their net income, this is self-employed and gig workers, to show that your net income is more than you might have gotten, might have just been reflected by the minimum benefit. People with actually almost no income can get the minimum benefit in Washington State, $235 a week. But to demonstrate that you have a higher income, and you could get benefits all the way up to $844 a week, you need to submit wage documentation that backs that up. So tax return is the best, but you can also submit, there is alternative data, but you can't documents, but you must get that data into, those documents into ESD as soon as possible. So one of the big questions all this year with the $600 a week payment from PUC has been, is that payment stopping people from working? And of course, there were a certain number of people who were finding themselves extraordinarily lucky this year compared to last year, because the $600 a week was a fairly substantial boost in income, which is a sad reflection on what the average income is. But there's a new report from the Yale Center for Economic Policy, which found that there's no evidence that more generous benefits disincentivized work or people's desire to work, either at the outset of the expansion or later on as firms were looking to return to business over time. And this was based on data from Homebase, which sells scheduling and time clock software to small businesses. And over half of those are in the food and drink industry, which has relatively low pay and massive layoffs. And even there, it's turned out to be, the finding was that it's true that people would really prefer to have a job than to be reliant on benefits. This week in the Seattle Times, Paul Roberts, who has been running a really excellent series of articles criticizing the handling of claims and other aspects of unemployment insurance in the state. His latest article is about the glitches and delays that have been sort of hounding Employment Security Department for months. Mostly the issue is delayed payments. In October, there were just 52% of claims filed with ESD paid within 21 days. That's a benchmark for timeliness that ESD has fallen very short on, although it is a big improvement over June and July when it was really, really low. It's still below the average in the country though, and it's behind 33 other states. ESD's own data shows that the time required to resolve delayed claims has grown from 4 weeks in early August to 9.7 weeks as of last week. A lot of criticism for the phone, over the phone system and website as well. John, did you have a comment? Sorry, I thought you said something. Okay. There was also a big criticism of ESD because they had resisted the 5 audits that are being conducted by the state auditor. And that is ongoing. Most of those audits have been delayed. Some were due at the end of this month. Probably in the spring, we're going to see the results of those audits, which were really inspired in many cases. Some are routine, but others were inspired by the kind of massive fraud that occurred targeting ESD in Washington. So ESD has added and trained staff to handle higher call volumes, and they've got about 13,000 calls a day coming in, which is a little bit lower than was happening a couple of months ago when it was at 20,000 a day. They do have a callback program so that at least 500 calls will be returned on the following day. And some people report that that is helping. What are the solutions to this problem? One of them was suggested this week by Representative Mossberger, who's on the Senate Labor Committee in Washington State. She represents the 14th legislative district, and she believes what the state most needs is more personal handling of unemployment claims in order to help people, because there's so many questions, there's so many ways to make a mistake. Many of the errors involve people answering a question wrong and then not being able to fix it. A lot of people aren't able to get through to ESD on the phone, and so they're not able to get clarification on how to fix this. She said, we need to educate them. We need to serve in some capacity to help them walk through the forms, educating and be more supportive in filling out the forms so that we don't have these unresolved claims. Because many times it's something very, very simple that was checked and they just didn't understand. So she's proposing more chance that you would reach a human being when you call ESD. Its chances are slim now. And in addition, she's suggesting that even volunteers could help in some sort of socially distanced settings to get people able to go fill out the applications correctly. So that's a significant thing because she's one of the Republican members of the committee, but is seeing one of the ways to improve the system would be something more personal. And in fact, this is the solution that was used in the 1930s when unemployment insurance was passed at the federal level. This was a typical person applying for unemployment because everything had to be done with pen and paper. But in many ways, it has a lot of advantages. Not that IT has to be done away with, but there should be more of a personal element, many people believe. And finally, I wanted to just mention something that we've contacted the ESD about several times. We're hoping that they will change their messaging a little bit more. They have already tried to clarify this issue about potential new claims, which are causing a lot of distress among claimants, and also what follows from them is overpayments, and that's causing even more stress. The problem is this, that ESD announced with an alert that there was something called potential new claims without explaining why this was important, which was that many people are in the wrong benefit program. So without changing to the correct program, usually it's changing from PUA back to regular state benefits, they're going to find themselves with an overpayment. And in fact, before they even had a chance to respond, many of them did get hit with an overpayment without an explanation that it had to do with this need to switch their programs. So Lavina, our wonderful TikTok star, has done a couple of videos on this, which are very short and very, very helpful.
In October of this year, the Employment Security Department sent approximately 26,000 people this notice. According to ESD, these notices were generated because the federal government required the state to switch many people from federal pandemic unemployment assistance to this regular state unemployment program. However, by calling it a potential new claim alert, which is incredibly vague and not urgent sounding at all, only half of the 26,000 people who were sent this notice actually replied. Many people can avoid repayment or resume suspended benefits simply by starting a new claim with ESD. Not everyone affected can solve the problem so simply. That's because PUA benefits are larger than regular state unemployment benefits. So claimants could be responsible for paying back the difference between the two. If you didn't reply to this notice in time, you're probably receiving overpayment notices now, but you can still appeal. I'm working on a part 2 of this video that'll have general recommendations for people receiving overpayment notices. Reminder, this is for Washington.
Because Lavina has national exposure now, she needs to remind people this is Washington State. But I'm sure there are other states.
In October of this year, the Employment Security Department sent approximately 26,000 people this notice. According to ESD, these notices.
Okay, this might not be the right video, but there is a part 2. If you go to our website, you can see both videos and all of Lavina's other videos, which have to do with PUA, with claims processing issues, and with glitches on the application, and they're very helpful. So that's the news. Oh. Now you're muted. Yeah.
Thanks, Ann. Yes, I just dropped the link for our website in the chat box. Thank you for those updates, Ann. Certainly changes are coming. Along the line of the timeline of the end of this year, we have a question regarding extended benefits. We have a participant who was recently approved for extended benefits. They have 2 weeks left in their PEUC benefits. They were told by an ESD representative that they would only get 1 week of extended benefits, as funding for it will end on 12/26. Most articles the participant has read relate to PUA and PEUC ending on the 26th, and potentially an article that federal funding for extended benefits will end on 12/26 and revert back to the feds paying only 50%. But this claimant is wondering, what information do we have as to the status of extended benefits payments after December 26th?
So the only things that expire December 26th are PUA and PEUC. The extended benefits will continue. The 50% that's being discussed is the amount of funding of extended benefits that's coming from the feds. But that is essentially a state program with federal support. That continues. So you don't have to worry about that expiring, but you only have a couple of weeks left of the PEUC extension of benefits.
Great, thank you. And we have a claimant who was denied regular UI, and that process took about 4 weeks, more than 4 weeks. Last week, they filed their first PUA claim. They mistakenly listed their claim start date as the Friday of the last day they worked. They sent a link, the ESD sent a link for a weekly claim for that week, asking them to report their earnings. They would like to change the start date to the following Monday when they had no hours or earnings, and want to know what's the best way to do this. Also, since it's been more than 4 weeks and they have not received a weekly claim, how can they go about filing for their next week?
4 weeks without filing, is that right?
Since it was more than 4 weeks ago and they did not receive a weekly claim for last week.
But she was filing. This person was filing. Okay.
My understanding I will contact the participant directly, but it looks like perhaps they might not have been filing those 4 weeks while they were waiting for ESD to adjudicate their regular UI claim. And last week they've started applying for PUA. But since there was a glitch in the date that they've filed for their PUA, so one question is they want to know what's the best way to correct their error on the date they filed for their PUA claim starting. And then my guess is maybe they're asking about how will they be able to file for all of those subsequent weeks. But I'm going to provide them my contact info.
Yeah, it's a little bit complicated. The best way to get it fixed is if you can get through to an agent on the phone. That's a long shot, but it's definitely worth trying. People can get things fixed very quickly that way, if the agent understands what all the real circumstances, all the real rules. A PUA claim, you can backdate it to whenever you became eligible for benefits, although because of this crackdown, which no one really expected, I don't know if they're changing federal policy on that, but I think it's part of the CARES Act, so it would be very difficult to change. You're supposed to get benefits. It doesn't matter whether you're backdating. You should not have to show any good cause. So you should be able to do that. If you go 5 weeks without filing an unemployment claim, it affects your the status of your claim. It's no longer active, so you have to start a new claim. John, can you say anything about what they should do?
Well, just a couple of things. Of course, everyone claiming unemployment must claim each.
You're not coming through.
No. Can you hear me now?
It's a little better.
Okay. So everyone claiming unemployment must claim weekly. If you claim in a week where there was income and you reported the income, that's not a problem. It would just affect benefits for that 1 week. So
John, your audio is I'm sorry, John, your audio is cutting in and out.
Yeah.
Let me
Do you want to rejoin the meeting, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
You better
We'll
come
just
back.
wait a minute for John to come back.
Yeah.
Please submit your questions in the Q&A box. Thanks to everyone who has sent in questions so far. We'll be sure and get to those.
These delays seem incredibly long, and we're unfortunately hearing that they're sort of routine. So it's really a sad thing to have to tell people. I'm sorry if you haven't heard anything for 2 months. That's not abnormal. Right.
And on that, I would say do what Anne recommended, send messages through your SAW account, try to call the representatives on the phone. We will also talk about what we should mention here, the option to contact your state representative. I'll drop a link for how to locate your district representative, how to locate what district you're in to then identify your state representatives. And you can contact them and let them know you've been waiting an unduly long period of time to see if they can provide some assistance as well.
Yes, and we just hooked up one claimant with that very problem today with the reporter at Seattle Times, and another one with a reporter at ABC News Nightline. So that's another way you'll find you get very speedy solution to your issue.
Great, thank you. And we'll welcome John. And also just a quick reminder that you can turn on closed captioning for this webinar by clicking on the transcript button on the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Any better?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
It's a bad connection. So the person, so each week anyone claims unemployment, they must make a weekly claim. I talked to somebody recently who had help getting the claim set up, but hasn't been claiming for weeks because it wasn't made clear to them that they had to make a weekly claim. If you open up a claim in the wrong week, it should not be a problem in that if you had income for that week and you reported it, it would maybe not qualify you for benefits for that particular week. So in this particular case, it may not be absolutely necessary to change the date as long as income was reported for that week.
Great, thank you. Speaking of timeliness and the extensive time that this process has taken, we have a participant who has had a 10-week wait on an involuntary 401k withdrawal payment and a 27-week adjudication on a voluntary overpayment issue for 1 week. Even by these standards, is this time frame out of the norm?
A voluntary quit overpayment?
Involuntary 401k withdrawal payment.
Well, without knowing the case, I mean, I'll just say in general, we get hundreds and actually thousands of phone calls with all kinds of problems like this. So the system has been having a lot of problems since March. A couple things in terms of getting things moving along, you could contact your state senator and representatives and the governor's office. I would email them and call them, your senator and your 2 representatives in the governor's office, to see if they could move things along or push things to move along. Also, you're free to contact the Unemployment Law Project and see if a possibility, any advocacy we could do may may make progress, but I would urge you to contact your state representatives.
Okay. We have a participant who has been waiting for an appeal date for over a month. They just checked their unemployment account and they've been notified they need to pay back money by December 7th, which is today. Please advise on how to get an appeal date. So first, I would just like to add that I have dropped in the chat box some contact information regarding overpayments. Once you have filed for an appeal, you can request a stay on your overpayment. And I've linked in the chat box the website link and the phone number to call the collections department to ask them to put a hold on your requirement for an overpayment pending your appeal. And Anne, do you want to talk a little bit about the timeline for appeals?
Sure. We're still seeing a couple of months delay, at least, before when you file an appeal, it goes to the Employment Security Department. They launch a process called redetermination. So they try to correct any errors, add any new information, try to see if they can handle it before sending it over to the Office of Administrative Hearings to be heard before a judge. That process is adding a lot of time. In some cases it helps, in others it's not so clear. It's really putting a lot of delays into the system. Once your appeal gets to OAH, it will also take another 8 to 12 weeks to get a hearing date. So things are significantly backlogged. So unfortunately, those delays are pretty much standard now.
The hearing notice will come by US mail. It's important you have the current address and check your mail every day. Also, you can call the Office of Administrative Hearings in Spokane to just inquire about it. It may get resolved without a hearing, but if you do have a hearing date coming, you can contact the Unemployment Law Project when you get a hearing date and seek our representation.
And by the way, this is one of the many reasons why it's a good thing to appeal rather than cause a lot of delay trying to fix your issue in another way. Once you appeal an overpayment, you can request a stay, which Benos has put that up, the phone number to call, and they can stop the overpayment notices to you.
And of course, if it gets resolved before a hearing, the hearing can be withdrawn. So
right.
There's no problem, there's no fee, there's no penalty for that.
Great. We have a fact pattern here. Claimant is a self-employed hairdresser. In September of 2019, she worked as an employee for a motel for about 20 hours over a 2-week period. The motel let her know there was no longer any work for her. Her unemployment application is currently pending. The motel now asserts that she voluntarily quit, which she disputes. ESD has asked her to respond to some questions. Would a finding of voluntary separation prevent her from receiving PUA as a self-employed person? Do we have any advice about responding to ESD?
Yes, the Department of Labor has made it quite clear that if you have a voluntary quit that without good cause, that should not interfere with receiving a PUA. Neither should a firing for misconduct, even if it involves fraud. So their language has been very strong about that. To get PUA, of course, you have to be denied regular benefits, which it sounds like this person has already gotten. So what you just need to do is make sure you get the PUA application in before the 26th. That is really, we're telling people that is drop dead deadline. It's possible there may be a couple of days after that, but because it's supposed to go to the end of the year. But December 26th is when everyone should get your PUA application in if you haven't already, and you really must get it in by then. But then the employment issue should not interfere, because if you have self-employed income, you should qualify for PUA. You only have to be sure that you have a COVID-related reason for being unemployed.
And one thing I'd like to add is that many people have been mistakenly been told by people at ESD that they had to appeal the denial in order to qualify for pandemic unemployment, the PUA, which is not true. You are denied, maybe for reasons that were correct or incorrect. But the point is, if you have a pandemic reason for being unemployed now, you should be able to get the pandemic without going through any kind of hearing process.
Right. So at this point, as we've mentioned, PUA and PEUC will expire on December 26th. do we have any indication at all whether they will continue into 2021?
I really hate this question because Congress is just so unreliable, but there are these budget issues. December 11th, they're going to have to make some decisions then. They're actively talking. They've now settled on a sort of $1 trillion answer to extending the CARES Act. That should help, but it's nothing I would take to the bank. Once it's implemented, it's still going to be a while before the checks actually start appearing and the amounts start appearing in people's bank accounts. So there is hope. Just don't stake a lot on being able to pay January's rent.
Also, I would urge people to express their opinion to their federal representatives. We have 2 senators, Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, and also your district representatives. If you're in Spokane, it's Kathy McMorris Rogers. In Seattle, Pramila Jayapal, but others around the state like Rick Larson, Jamie Butler, Kim Schreier. I don't have all of them memorized, but they are easy to find. You should email them and call them about how important this is as an issue. There's a lot of debate in Washington, D.C. about compromise. And if you've been following politics for any length of time, a lot of issues come down to compromise because we have a legislature that's split, and then we have a president of one party, and there'll be an incoming president of another party. And there's a lot of deal making and things that go on behind the scenes. But if the legislatures, if the legislators across the board, no matter what party, hear a strong voice from people across America that help is needed, even if it's not what we would like it to be or as much as we think it should be, I think those voices will be heard. So I urge people to write and call their senators and their federal representatives.
Great. Thank you, John. Is there a standard formula for PUA calculations based off of the 2019 tax return?
Yeah, for self-employed. So yes, so whatever your net income is showing on your 1040, for example, that would be the income you had after whatever expenses you accumulated as a self-employed person. So money you spend on gas or supplies or anything that you would subtract from your gross income. So it's different. Obviously, it's different from people who are on wages or salaries because they do report their gross income, but it's net income. And once you have the net income, then it's the same formula as is used for calculating regular benefits, which is more or less about half of your income. It's a complicated formula, but the complications basically conceal that it's about half.
Great, thank you. There are no additional questions in the chat box, in the Q&A box, so we will wait another couple minutes. If you have additional questions, please add them to the Q&A box and we will answer them today. And again, we will be back next week as well, but we'll wait a few more minutes for your additional questions.
While we're waiting, I just like to say in general, whether it be you or someone you know, if you have requested a hearing, if you want help, either advice or representation from the Unemployment Law Project, it's good to contact us right when you get your hearing date and contact the hearing office to ask them to send your file to our office, and we can set up an intake interview. And if we can take the case, assign it to a representative. It's better to do this sooner rather than later. Watch your mail every day. If you're going to leave town for a couple of days, have someone watch your mail, because the hearings, often you've waited for months and then the hearing comes up and you could miss the hearing and then have to get it reinstated, which is can be a pain. So it's good to keep on that because it can come up suddenly. And a lot of people mistakenly assume that because they have waited months to give you a hearing, when they do, they'll give you at least a month to get ready. And I've seen them give very short notice sometimes, especially if your mail is delayed. with the post office cutbacks, and if you don't check your mail every day, if you maybe have a PO box, like some people don't get mail every day, that could be a problem. So we hear from people who will miss a hearing because they don't check their mail on a regular basis. So it's important to do that. And of course, you can always call the hearing office in Spokane to find out when your hearing might be scheduled.
Great, thank you. And as we know, Anne, PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, was created to address unemployment for self-employed, part-time employees, and independent contractors. So can a person be both partly self-employed and partly working for an employer, such as writing articles or submitting documents for business in that regard, and still qualify for PUA?
The only requirement to qualify for PUA at the outset is you have to be denied regular benefits. So if you got 680 hours in your base year, 2019, then you may be able to qualify for regular benefits. If you have fewer than 680 hours, you should automatically be considered for PUA once you apply, because you don't qualify for state benefits. But this is only for 19 more days. If your benefits cover the period between now and going back to March, you benefits are still available retroactively.
Great, thank you. We have a retired clerical substitute. Her unemployment insurance will end this month. How does she apply for unemployment insurance again, or would she even be eligible for it?
Do we know if this is PUA or regular benefits?
She says UI, so I believe it might be regular.
So, John, were you going to say something?
Well, yeah. What kind of unemployment is it? So if it's there should be extensions available if this is the initial claim. I'm not sure if this is the end of an extension, if there's any alternatives at the end of the extension. It might be better if the person contacted us individually to kind of sort through it, because there are the extensions, but I'm not sure if this is at the end of the extension. If you've exhausted all of your benefits, if you've exhausted your claims completely, then unless Congress acts, there won't be anything until next year. But I'm guessing that there might be extensions available.
So if a regular UI claim is expiring, is exhausting, PEUC is still available. Since there's less than 2 weeks left before that program ends, it's probably only 1 week that you could apply for PEUC. But once that expires, you should be eligible for extended benefits. So that right now, that's an extra 13 weeks. Given the way the unemployment rate is trending, I rather expect it's going to go back up to 20 weeks. But in the meantime, you should have at least 13 weeks of benefits under the extended benefits program, which is a state program.
Okay, it looks like the claimant has updated the information and they are receiving PUA.
They are, okay. So PUA and PEUC both expire December 26th. So the only recourse because of that is for the person to go back and apply for regular unemployment, and see if there's some way they can qualify. Usually if you're denied benefits, you get what's called you get about 7 weeks where you're asked to, you can potentially qualify for benefits, regular benefits, if you were denied. If you take 7 weeks and if you earn a certain amount of money, that's called purging a denial. So you should look at your denial of regular benefits and see what the requirement was there, because once that period is up, once you've earned enough money, you might be able to qualify for regular benefits.
Great. Okay, we have a participant who called this morning for a stay and was eventually instructed by a voice message that after the time that their appeal has passed, they will then be sent a bill and payment options if they are still required to pay the overpayment. Are they to assume that this was the entire process they needed to perform to request the stay?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So it says that the participant called this morning for a stay and eventually was instructed by a voice message that after the time of their appeals pass, they will then receive a bill and payment options.
But no option for a stay. Was
Well,
mentioned.
Oh, I think it was granted. I mean, it sounds like that. Of course, this is government language, so it has to be translated back into English. So it sounds like that they will resume billing after the appeal has been resolved. That's what
So
it's.
maybe that's what they were saying. It's like potential new claim. It's totally almost the opposite of what it should be.
Great. Yes, exactly. It does seem very counterintuitive, or they forget to add essential language such as, thank you, we've received your request for X, and here's what you need to do for Y. So, okay. We have a participant. Thank you for all your hard work. This cannot be easy. Thank you. We appreciate your gratitude. The claimant had to set up an appeal process, and based on our website's guidance, they also contacted their state representative. They heard from them immediately, and they were also followed up by ESD immediately. They heard from someone at ESD the next day, and then nothing. It's been 2 weeks with no response. They understand our guidance is to contact the representatives and ask them to get more resources to help everyone, but the idea of sending our claimants back to their legislative representatives might not be getting the results that we're hoping for them to achieve. So this person unfortunately feels like they're stuck on the same carousel ride, and we can certainly empathize. What suggestions do we have for them to move forward?
Well, unfortunately, since there are many representatives around the state, many different types of claims problems, we've heard many different responses to this. So we put that out as general information. I can tell you stories about somebody who called their senator, no luck. They called one representative, no luck. Called the third, and it worked. Or they called the governor's office, and that worked. Or some kind of combination of things. They requested a hearing, and then somebody contacted them and got it resolved. So we hear, since we do get hundreds of calls every week and thousands over the last month, different results. So again, if there is no response or no resolution from one particular senator or representative, you might want to try another one, or the governor's office, or again, you can contact our office directly and see if we might be able to advocate. But when we try to advocate, we're basically using the same channels the representatives are using. So the results have been mixed, but I would encourage you to contact us as well for help.
Great. Okay. We have a participant, when they recalculated their weekly pay on e-services, it came out to be $304 a week, not the $235 minimum. Would they contact ESD and ask them to correct this, or would they file an appeal?
You mean it's too high? Did I understand that right?
ESD calculated them at $235 minimum, and my understanding is they calculated themselves at $304. So I believe they're being underpaid.
So
Wonderful.
yeah, you can go to e-services and submit new documentation, leave a message, and also sit by the telephone and keep calling.
Or also, if any document you receive, and this is for everybody, but read it carefully and see if there's anything at the bottom or somewhere on the back about your right to appeal or ask for redetermination or something like that. So always read these documents beginning to end, as that might be a way to handle it.
When you submit new documentation, by the way, ESD is required to recalculate your benefit and pay benefits retroactive to whenever you became qualified. This is under the CARES Act.
Great. After being approved for extended benefits, e-services shows you have enough benefits left for 22 payments as long as you remain eligible. However, your claim ends 12/26/2020. I have had UI and PEUC since March. The ESD representative said they would not receive extended benefits after 12/26 due to the language above. Should they be concerned about this? Hundreds of others in a Facebook group are in the same boat, and we are all quite worried.
Yeah, unfortunately, right, the way things are right now, PUA and PEUC will be done December 26th. I wasn't quite clear on the question about extended benefits. You need to apply for regular UI in order to get either extended benefits or anything. So, or regular UI. So that would be the first step if I were looking at that deadline.
Thank you. There are no additional questions. I'm just searching here to make sure. Okay, for everyone who has filed an appeal and you are trying to contact ESD regarding overpayments, please make sure that you let ESD know you have already filed your appeal. Either send them a message through your e-services account, or if you happen to get someone on the line regarding your overpayment, do let them know that you have filed an appeal. And again, appeals at this point is taking about 3 months to 3.5 months to receive your hearing date. So while I understand you may have filed a month or 6 weeks ago, and that is an excessively long time, it is taking a lot longer than that to receive your hearing date. But whenever you do contact ESD, especially regarding overpayments, be sure and let them know you have filed for your appeal. Okay. There are no additional questions right now. There is one. Okay. Okay, coming in. If I apply for the standard UI, must I need to show 680 hours of work? For me, as a substitute, that's almost non-existent.
So PUA is still based on what you did last year. And part-time people, even people, in fact, some people who have 0 hours last year can qualify for PUA. The only requirement is that you have to have a COVID-related reason for being unemployed or partially unemployed. And you can get it retroactively, but you have to appeal before December 26th, D-Day.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anne. I see no additional questions at this time. If you need additional assistance, take a look at our website and you can contact our office. We are here to help you. Please be patient. We're returning phone calls as quickly as we can. You can also email us, and you can always find us here next week for our weekly webinars. We appreciate you being here today. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you.